July 1st, 1892. Dear Martha, today our wagons were traveling through the pine forests. Reminded me of when our wagon train had passed through the pine forests of Alabama. That made me miss Mama and Pap, and how our life has been. I was riding up front with Massimo. We rode without talking most of the time. Suddenly, Massimo said, "Look at the trees." He pointed with his chin. All the pine trees had little buckets hanging on them. Someone had made cuts in the trees, cuts that looked like a big V in the bark. Massimo said, "They're making turpentine. Smell it?" He was right. As soon as I began to smell the aroma of turpentine. You know, the clear liquid you soak your paintbrush in when you're painting the house or painting your fence? Massimo said they use it when they build ships too. Something about making them waterproof. Anyhow, turpentine smells peculiar. The road opened up to a camp in the woods. Rows and rows of tiny houses, all identical, lined the way. Children were running around, playing everywhere. When they saw us, they stopped and stared like they were seeing the most astonishing thing they had ever seen. I'm sure they were. It's not every day a circus drives through the woods. Funny thing is, 1 second kids were laughing, shouting to each other, and the next second, they were completely silent. They stared with wide eyes as we drove by. Most of the women's hair was bound up in bandanas or turbans. Their feet were bare. Many of them carried 2 or even 3 babies on their hips. They were as curious as the children. Turpentine camp was just past the cabins. There was a company store, big turpentine still, and sweating, muscled men working. When they saw our wagons, they come running, shouting questions. "Did that lion come from Africa? What do your elephants eat? Could that tiger eat me? I bet he could. Mister, is that a monkey?" I asked Massimo about the workmen. Distilling turpentine is how they make their living. It's dangerous, hard work. See that store back there? Pointed over his shoulder. Well, that's a company store. They let you buy on credit. Then they let you buy a little more. Soon, you owe your soul to the company store, as the saying goes. You can't leave or quit work because you still owe the boss man. We rolled on past the workers, past the still, through the forest. As we were jostling along, glad to be in the shade of the pines, a wagon full of people was heading in our direction. Now, this wasn't just a wagon. This was at least 10 times bigger than any wagon I've ever seen, including a circus wagon. It was filled with people. At least 40 men, women, and children. They looked poor and weary and hungry. When they saw us, the driver pulled over off the road so we could pass. They looked like they had traveled a great distance and were headed to the turpentine camp. When Susanna saw them, she said something in Italian to Massimo. They stopped our wagons and pulled over. Massimo and Susanna brought our wash tubs full of fresh sweet oranges. I knew they were meant for the elephants' treats, but Susanna said, "Daniel, Teddy, please help us give these folks something to eat." We gave out oranges to the folks in the wagon. A man said, "These folks have given us oranges. See, children? Bite a hole in the skin, and then you can work the peel off with your fingers. This is fine eating. Thank you kindly." After the oranges were gone, we drove on to join up with our caravan. After the oranges were gone, we drove on to join up with our own caravan of wagons. Love, Teddy. July 2nd, 1892. Dear Martha, today is our last day of driving to Jacksonville. Daniel and I watered all the elephants early this morning. We drew extra buckets of water, too. Then we cut up their fruit and vegetables and brought in fresh hay. By 8 o'clock, we were finished and could eat breakfast. But no matter how hard we try, we're always the last to eat. Circus folks get up before the crack of dawn. Of course, when we're cutting ripe watermelon for the elephants, we might snitch a few pieces for ourselves. I'll never tell. Daniel and I rode together all day on the platform right behind Babette's wagon. It looked like a good place to work, and Daniel wanted to get back to his reading and writing. I wanted to get caught up in my sketchbook. We gave Babette a handful of ripe bananas, so she would know we meant her no harm. I had to ask Massimo's permission for us to sit there. Elephants are funny about their territory. We sat on the platform with our backs next to the door of Babette's cage. Ethel lay down beside me and put his head in my lap. Daniel and I reviewed the letters of his name, sounds he had learned, and some of the basics about reading and writing. While Daniel practiced, I flipped through the pages of my sketchbook. I hadn't looked at it in weeks. It was like taking a journey back to the beginning of our trip. Could I be the same kid who left Mississippi this past February? So much has happened. So much has changed. I looked at the sketch I had made of the white heron. It seemed like I had drawn it 100 years ago. And the burlap sack troll we shot with our slingshots, and the scarlet king snake, and the dancing at the whoop-de-doo, and Jeb in January. So many memories, happy and sad. I don't even feel like the same girl. Of course, I'm not the same girl. I'm now a boy, Teddy Bodain, traveling with my cousin Daniel, who I didn't even know existed before I got to McCanopy and found him. For about the millionth time, I wondered how it would all turn out. Where in the world are Mama and Pap? Will we ever get to our land? The part about the land is a puzzlement. Pap doesn't work for Mr. Albertron anymore. Junie Laquat's father took over Pap's job when we left. So we can't go back to Mississippi. I don't even know how Mr. Albertron is going to pay Mr. Laquat because he couldn't pay Pap. But what will Pap do if he tries to claim the land and doesn't have the deed? Did I do the wrong thing to take the deed with me? Should I have left it in the wagon? Is Pap somewhere wishing he had the land deed? Thinking about all that gave me a stomach ache and a headache at the same time. When I turned the page and saw the sketch of Dylan, I had put my fist to my mouth to keep from crying. I wondered what will happen to me now. Who else will I lose? Martha, I couldn't help it. The tears came and I couldn't stop them. I was embarrassed in front of Daniel. When I tried to cry quietly, I ended up crying louder. I felt stupid and miserable and ashamed. Daniel said, "It's okay, Teddy. I won't tell anyone. Just tell me. What is it? What's wrong?" I didn't even know why I was crying. My answer came out so dumb. I said, "What if there isn't a red bird, Daniel? What if there isn't a red bird to guide us?" Daniel didn't say anything. Instead, he wrote something on his paper and slid it over to me. He wrote, "Don't worry, Teddy. We will guide each other." I dried my tears. Daniel can read and write some. I taught him how. He still needs help in spelling, but that's what I'm here for. Jump in jubilation. Today was a good day after all. Love, Teddy. July 3rd, 1892. Dear Martha, we are in Jacksonville. Tomorrow's the 4th of July. We are here for all of the festivities. Massimo and Susanna wanted to be sure the girls looked their best tomorrow. We scrubbed each elephant, filed her toenails, and painted them with lard, and mended their costumes if they needed it. Susanna said, "Boys, time for haircuts. I don't want you to look shabby during the parade." I remembered Daniel's hair dye. It was time to redo it, or all the black part would be cut off. I said, Susanna, we might have a problem with Daniel's hair." She said, "Let's tell Angelo to dye it black again after he cuts it." I said, "How long have you known it was dyed?" Susanna said, "I'm an Italian. You can't fool an Italian." Angelo did a good job dyeing Daniel's hair black again and gave us both haircuts. This time, I really looked like a boy. I ran my hand through my hair, looking at it from side to side. Susanna said, "And don't you think you've got me fooled about you being a boy either." I said, "Did Marie tell you?" She said, "She didn't have to. I already told you. You can't fool an Italian." We wiped down all the cages, polished the metal trim on the elephants' costumes, and brushed up the plumes on their headdresses. This afternoon, Daniel and I went to hear John Philip Sousa's marching band. They are here for the big parade tomorrow morning for the 4th of July, and they are practicing right next to us on the fairgrounds. Daniel and Ethelbert and I sat on the grass and listened to them tune. I've never seen so many different kinds of instruments. There were tiny little silver piccolos, giant tubas, and timpanis, xylophones, trumpets, trombones, flutes, and every kind of drum you could imagine. The sound of all the instruments tuning filled us with excitement. I've heard the circus band tune up before, but it was nothing like this. John Philip Sosa took the field. All the instruments came to attention. Wow, he is handsome. He wore a uniform even to practice in. When he raised his hands to direct, all the musicians raised their instruments. And when his hand with the big baton came down, they played. Tom Harrison from our circus band came to sit with us. He called out the names of the marches as they played them. The Gladiator March, Semper Fidelis, the Washington Post, the Thunderer, the Liberty Bell, and a new march called the Bo Ideal. They must call them marches because when you hear them, the music is so stirring and patriotic that you feel like marching yourself. Afterwards, Daniel and I volunteered to help them pack up their chairs and instruments. The drum band still had their drums out. Some of the men said, "Would you boys like to learn how to play the bass drum?" We thought it was for real, but they were just playing a trick. Once we got strapped to the big drum, it was a lot bigger than we were. Way too big for us to march and play. We laughed about it and were good sports, so they let us play a little while they stood the drums on the ground. While we were playing around, guess who came over to speak to us? John Philip Sosa. I was flabbergasted. He said, "Boys, I need good musicians, not just now, but in the future. Here's a silver dollar for each of you. Remember me when you get good enough to join a marching band. Great buckets of butter beans. Only in my life could you scrub elephant cages in the morning and in the afternoon meet the most famous musician in the world. Love, Teddy." July 4th, 1892. Dear Martha, I don't know if there has ever been a 4th of July like this one. Not for me, at least. Jacksonville is filled with people. People who came to see the circus, people who came to see the fireworks display, and people who came to hear John Philip Sosa and his world-famous band. This morning was the big 4th of July parade for the city of Jacksonville. Along with everyone else, our circus and the Sosa Marching Band marched. Sosa's band was right in front of us. Then came the ringmaster, the clowns, all the acrobats, all the animals in cages, and finally, our elephants. Susanna led the way, perched on top of Babette, followed by the rest of the elephants. Daniel and I rode on Denise and Saba, holding onto their collars with one hand and waving to the people with the other. Massimo walked behind us with the babies, Linda and Donabelle. Massimo said he overheard Pete talking with Carl Ringling, and they estimate there were 10,000 people lining the streets of Jacksonville to see us. All I know is I've never seen so many faces laughing and smiling and pointing. Right after the parade, they opened the midway so folks could buy their lunches. They hired extra staff to help with the workload while we were here in Jacksonville. They were up all night making candy apples, caramel corn, popcorn, fudge, corn on the cob, hot dogs, and wagon loads of lemonade. After folks got their lunches, we started our first matinee performance. Today is a threefer, meaning there were so many people, we gave 3 performances. The performances are each a little shorter than they would normally be, but that's so we can get all the folks in to see the circus. This evening, when we finished, the sun was still shining. Carl Ringling invited all performers to join a special celebration on the beach. The beach. I've looked forward to seeing the beach since we arrived in Florida. Right near the beach, there was a railroad track set up with a steam engine and a few cars hooked behind it. The mayor of Jacksonville and some officials were standing on a platform next to the train tracks. The mayor spoke with a megaphone. "Our friend, Henry Morrison Flagler, has already opened up Florida with the railroad. Today, folks can travel from Jacksonville to Daytona Beach. I am happy to announce to you that he is starting a new phase of work on the tracks, and soon we'll be able to travel from Jacksonville to Miami by railroad car." The cheering almost drowned out the beginning of John Philip Sosa's marching band. Almost. They started up on a brand new Sosa march called Manhattan Beach March. As the song began to play, fireworks exploded into the sky. I had never seen fireworks before, and when they first went off, I was astonished. even frightened. They looked like little explosions from an invading army, but they were beautiful. They lit up the night sky, trailing lights and disappearing colors. One after the other, they burst out colors and shapes and sparkles that were almost beyond my imagination. Sister's marching band played and played while the fireworks exploded in the sky overhead. Daniel and Ethel and I sat on sand, eating hot dogs and drinking root beer. When the band finally started playing the Star-Spangled Banner, everyone began singing. Daniel and I stood to our feet and sang too, even though we had to struggle with the words. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, Martha, I have so much to tell, Mama. Love, Teddy. July 5th, 1892. Dear Martha, today was a free day. After we got our work done, we were free to walk around in town. About 4 o'clock, Massimo called us to his wagon. He said, I've asked Pete to have the work crew haul the water this evening so you don't have to do it. Daniel said, that's great, but why not? Massimo said, because we're taking you out to supper. He handed us a stack of folded clothes. Susanna said you would be able to find something to wear in these. Be ready to leave in 30 minutes, eh? Daniel and I raced off to get ready. When we met to leave for supper, Susanna said, I hardly recognize you. She smiled her approval. Tonight, we want you to see the city. There won't be much time tomorrow. We roll out early. Massimo said, tonight we eat Italian. My brother Stefano owns the best restaurant in town. We rode in an elegant, open buggy through the town of Jacksonville. It gave us a chance to see the beautiful buildings and homes. The sights were breathtaking. But the best part was, we got to see the ocean again. Stefano's restaurant was built on white sand. Further out from it, waves crashed, forming a shore. As far as I could see, to the north and south, was beach. The waves rushed in, becoming only a thin foam by the time they reached my feet. I wanted my sketchbook so I could draw them. Massimo pointed. You see this big ocean? This is the Atlantic. Susanna and I crossed this ocean by ship all the way from Italy. We were 3 weeks sailing. I tried to look beyond the waves and picture the big, vast ocean that had brought Susanna and Massimo all the way from Italy. I felt very small. The world was bigger than I ever dreamed. Stefano came to greet us with embraces. Massimo introduced us as Vincelli and Guardamo. Stefano instantly began speaking Italian. Massimo said, they don't speak Italian. Stefano shook his head disappointed. Well, then you better eat Italian. This is the best Italian food this side of Lago Maggiore. His waiters brought out platters of food. So many we couldn't keep up with them all. I've never tasted such delicious foods. Sausages, peppers, fish, meats, cheeses, and even octopus. After the dishes were cleared away, Massimo said, Teddy, Daniel, we have something to tell you. Tomorrow, the circus will leave Florida. We are headed north. I thought of Mama and Pap looking for me. Susanna said, we know you're looking for your parents, Teddy. You're welcome to stay with us for the season, but you need to know that our journey will now take us far from Florida, thousands of miles, perhaps. My heart felt heavy. I said, I cannot go with you. I must continue to look for Mama and Pap. Susanna said, Daniel, will you stay with us? I held my breath. I know how Daniel loves the circus. Daniel said, Teddy and I are family. Family sticks together. Thank you for your offer, though. Massimo said, here is your pay and a little extra Susanna and I threw in to help you. And there's enough for a train ticket to take you from Jacksonville down south of here. Perhaps you'll pick up the trail of your parents. He handed me an envelope. You're always welcome with us if you come back. I said thank you. I don't know how to repay your kindness. Massimo looked at me with his kind eyes. You're nice to our girls. We are nice to you. We were all quiet as we rode in the open buggy back to the circus camp. I will miss Susanna and Massimo and especially the elephants. Love, Teddy. July 6, 1892. Dear Martha, Daniel and I didn't have long to be sad about leaving the elephants. When we got back to camp last night, Marie and Elmer came to see Massimo. Elmer said he was here again, that troublemaker. Massimo said, who? Which one? Marie said, that townie with the scar, the one who was asking questions about Teddy and Daniel. Susanna knew that I would panic. She said, see Teddy. Not a minute too soon. Perfect timing. Massimo said, he'll be here in the morning trying to find them as we leave. Susanna didn't seem worried. Yes, he'll be here looking for 2 boys who will be going north with us. But he won't be looking for 2 girls who are going south on the train. Daniel said, uh-oh. He looked at me. 2 girls? Marie said, you will need my help. Susanna said, yes, Marie. Meet me at the costume wagon. Elmer can find me 2 boys who are roughly the size of Teddy and Daniel. I'll need them for a little while in the morning, about 7 o'clock. Marie and Susanna began laying out bolts of material and shuffling through patterns. And as they worked, Susanna asked, Teddy, did you mention that you know someone in St. Augustine? I said, yes, Miss Melman lives in St. Augustine. She'll help us, I'm sure. Susanna said, good. Then this disguise only has to work until then. Daniel said, but what about my hair? It's cut really short. Marie said, this is a circus, Daniel. We have every kind of wig you could ask for. Massimo said, I'll telegraph you are Miss Melman first thing in the morning. I said, she's at the Sheridan School for Girls, Miss Casey Melman. Marie and Susanna worked quickly, calling in Alina and Camilla to help with the sewing. Marie measured and poked and prodded us to turn this way and that. Daniel and I napped in between fittings. Early this morning, our costumes were ready. When Susanna and Marie got through with Daniel, he looked like any other girl you would see on the street, except he was miserable. He rolled his eyes, he twitched, he even moaned. Susanna patted his hand and said, desperate times call for desperate measures. When I got my dress on, and the wig and hat Marie had chosen for me, everyone stared. Oh, Teddy, Susanna said, for the first time you look like a girl, a pretty girl. Massimo bundled us off to one of the biggest wagons while it was still dark. He said, whoever comes to get you, call him Uncle and act like you are his family. He will make sure you get to the train station. Leave the rest up to us. What about Elizabeth? We got a plan, you'll see. About 7 o'clock, the door to the wagon opened. It was Carl Ringling, the owner of the circus. He called out, come, Prissy, come, Helen. We're ready to take you to the station. We got into a buggy. A baby's pram was already in the buggy beside us. I looked at it. Inside the pram, in a baby's gown, a bonnet, was Ethelbert. Only his furry face showed above the blankets. I had to force myself not to look shocked or laugh out loud. I said, thank you, Uncle. We had a nice time visiting you at the circus. We drove to the station. He helped us find a seat on the train, lifted the pram up beside us, and put our suitcase on the shelf overhead. He smiled and said, now be good children and tell your mother hello. Then, just like that, he was gone. Love, Teddy. July 7th, 1892. Dear Martha, we left the station this morning right after Carl Ringling made sure we were safe in our seats. We had our tickets in hand. The train started out slow as the steam built up. Chug, 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 chug. But after a few minutes, it picked up speed. Clackety-choo, clackety-choo, clackety, clackety, clackety-choo. Before we knew it, we were whipping along those tracks lickety-split. Ethel looked at me with wild eyes. He was frightened, and I was afraid he would start howling. But Susanna had thought of everything. There was a big baby bottle in the pram, and it had milk in it. Ethel couldn't suck it like a baby, but he licked up the drops that squirted out the tip until he was calm and sleepy-eyed. I scratched his ears under the baby bonnet. He fell asleep on his back, which is a good thing, because when he falls asleep on his back, he sleeps a long time. It's also a good thing because the conductor came by and punched our tickets right after Ethel fell asleep. I turned the pram so no one could see inside. Today was my first train ride. The only word that comes to mind is power. The train is built of steel and iron, and the engine fills the whole car. The train cars are on wheels, but each wheel has a steel arm that pulls it around and then around again and again. I opened my sketchbook and tried to sketch the scenes I saw from the open window. The sea was calm, so instead of crashing, the waves folded over gently and washed ashore. We passed giant sand dunes, a few beach cottages, and flocks of seagulls. Suddenly, the conductor called, "St. Augustine," and the train began to slow. The steam whistle blew. Daniel grabbed our suitcase, and I rolled the pram to the exit. A porter lifted it down for me. I couldn't believe it, but Ethel stayed inside. The platform was filled with people getting on and off the train. Families and friends gathered down at the end. Daniel hissed at me. "I look stupid, you know." I said, "No, you don't. You look like a girl." He said, "What if she doesn't like me?" I said, "Who are you talking about?" He said, "Miss Melman. What if she doesn't like me?" Right then, I saw her. She was wearing a starched skirt and a trim white hat. She had a gold locket around her neck. I called, "Miss Melman." She came forward and said in a formal voice, "I am so pleased to meet you. I'm Casey Melman of the Sheridan School for Girls." I said, "Miss Melman, it's me, Theodosia." She frowned. Then she looked curious. She stepped back and looked at me again, as if she couldn't believe her own eyes. Then Miss Melman's face broke into the biggest smile. She grabbed me in a bear hug and squeezed me like she would never let go. "You're alive! It's you!" I got the strangest telegram from the Ringling Brothers Circus. It said Carl Ringling's nieces would be arriving at the station today, and would I please meet their train? I had no idea it was you. This is truly a stellar day. When Ethel heard the commotion, he jumped up and started barking. Miss Melman said, "Ethelbert!" I'll have to admit, it was strange seeing Ethel in a baby bonnet. Oh, Martha, I wish you could have been there. Love, Teddy. July 8th, 1892. Dear Martha, let me continue. I've left you hanging. I could tell that Miss Melman was totally confused. There'd be a lot of explaining to do. I pushed Daniel forward. "Miss Melman, this is my cousin." Miss Melman said, "She's so pretty. I'm so glad to meet her." She turned to Daniel. "And what is your name, dear?" I said, "His name is Daniel." She looked at Daniel's bonnet, hair, and dress and said, "His name is Daniel?" We have some catching up to do. When we got to Miss Melman's cute little cottage at the Sheridan School for Girls, she said, "I'm a cook now, Teddy, so no talking until I get a good hot meal into you. I know two tired, hungry children when I see them." She made chicken and dumplings, salad, melon slices, and iced tea. We ate out on her porch. Then she said, "Now I want to hear all about it." Daniel and I spent the next 3 hours telling her everything that has happened since I last saw her with the wagon train. Every now and then she would interrupt us to say, "It did," or "You don't say," or "I can't imagine," or "Weren't you scared?" Miss Melman is another adult who listens when kids speak. She was interested in everything we talked about. I told her about the quarantine station, about Miss Essie Mae Pitts, and about Jasper Lowe's pap. Told her about the wagons being impounded, about having to live on my own. She said, "Goodness gracious, Teddy, you're a brave girl, but this just takes the cake." I told her about Dr. Winklepleck and the balloon ride, Green family, and Vernon Jimbo and Verna's creepy children. Daniel told her about us meeting in the woods and how we were cousins and why we had to run away together. He told her about Wanda and Dr. Zorin and joining the circus. Miss Melman said, "So you had to disguise yourself as a boy," and pointed at me. When we got to the part of the story about Jimbo Dudd looking for us again at the circus yesterday, Miss Melman said, "So you had to disguise yourself as a girl," and pointed at Daniel. Then she chewed on her bottom lip and squinched her eyes. She sat thinking, rubbing her thumbs. She said, "We're going to have a plan." Yes, we are. What Susanna and Massimo did bought us some time. But sooner or later, that ne'er-do-well will turn up here asking questions and looking for you. Now it was my turn to ask questions. I said, "What happened when the soldiers took me away?" Miss Melman told us how the wagon train had to move on to keep more people from getting the fever and dying. She said, I didn't know what to do, Teddy. I took Gurley and Gabriel with me because I could tie them behind my wagon. We'll go out and see them a little later. I left you a note in the wagon. I said, I found it. I felt a lump in my throat thinking about the night I found it. I felt so alone. She said, lots of folks died. We lost 16 people from our wagon train that we know of. There are others that we never heard from once they were taken away. Her voice grew soft. Teddy, where are your parents? Do you know if they're alive? I told her what the man at Mrs. Plume's quarantine station said about a Mr. and Mrs. Bodain dying of the fever. I said, but I'm sure it's not them. I'm sure they're alive. I hope she believed me. Mom and Pap can't be dead. Not now, when they're so young. Not now, when we're going to start our new life together. Not now, when I need them so much. Before bedtime, I showed her the land deed. See? This is about Pap's land. Miss Melman read it carefully. It says your father's land is in Dade County. He's to file his claim at the land office in the county courthouse. She fixed me a nice warm bath and went to round us up some clothes to wear. I felt like tonight I might be able to sleep without worrying for the first time in a long time. I hope. Love, Teddy.